I also want to kind of talk about what we do know, right? So while the presidential election is still too close to call, and there is, so much wrong with what's going on, particularly thinking about the health of the state of our democracy. But some of the things that we do know that are exciting to me as a scholar of race and gender politics is that we've seen a change in who was elected this election cycle. So there are a number of women that picked up seats this term, and particularly GOP women, which is something that, I think for me this has been really the underdeveloped story of 2020. There was a large number of women of color running as Republicans, and some of whom, right, picked up some seats. And we haven't talked a lot about this. I think as scholars, we should do a much better job of framing out what women's issues are, and they're not, conflating women's issues and feminist issues is a problem. For another thing that makes me extremely hardened is thinking about the diversity of representatives that we're going to see enter into state houses in the federal government come January 2021. We saw a rainbow wave of people of color, particularly Black, queer members that represent House representatives and state elected state houses. And this is something that I think most of us in the mainstream Black politics have not addressed or talked about. So I'm excited to really complicate in our narratives of what identities matter and how, and really expand these boundaries of Blackness to do more to interrogate queerness. And I'm particularly hardened by some of these elected officials happening in deep red places like Georgia and Tennessee, not just New York, where we saw like Richie Torres, right? So making these blanket statements that certain groups of people are not electable in certain places, I think is just wrong. We need to recalculate what voters want and who they're willing to support, and what candidates will be viable. I'm also looking forward to having a more expansive discussion of what the Democratic Party at the federal level will look like, with more progressives being elected to the House of Representatives. I think we're going to see a push of particularly the Congressional Black Caucus, and they're going to have some, I think, real come to Jesus moments to talk about who they want to be, right? I am, again, particularly hardened by the election of Cori Bush in St. Louis, Ferguson area, who upended a seat held by someone with the last name Clay for over 60 years. And that's because she showed up and was present for people in ways that Clay wasn't, particularly after the Ferguson unrest. I loved her acceptance speech. I love the dress that she wore. I love all of this. And I hope that political scientists are looking more at symbolic politics, politics of protest, and electoral politics all in one, because I think we see this in Cori Bush. And then lastly, I am hardened by the new delegation from New Mexico, the first all woman, all women of color delegation, two members of tribal communities and one Latina. This is a story that I hope will get more attention as opposed to Trump's antics, but that the people of New Mexico see these women as fighting for them, as having a valuable voice to add in their representation. And this is a monumental first that I hope gets more attention. Sorry. Lastly, this is really the last point. This is really the last point. And so then, with all of this, right, I don't want to forget Kamala Harris at the right on the Democratic ticket, right? The most pop to be the first multi-ethnic Black woman that will serve in this. And I don't want to divorce her candidacy and this historic moment from what we're seeing writ large, right? So the comments that I made earlier, setting up how we're seeing diversity in elected officials, will also hold true for Kamala Harris. So I don't want to paint her as this unicorn, that there are other women and other folks of color that are already kind of laying the groundwork, and she's happening to be part of them. And so I don't want to take our eyes, focus them solely on her without recognizing these other folks.